Tuesday, 10:42 a.m. ***. The glass door closed behind Ryan Cole with a soft, final click. No handshake followed him. No polite promise of "we'll be in touch." Just the muted sound of the latch settling into place, sealing off the conference room and the version of the future he had allowed himself to imagine for exactly 27 minutes. Ryan stood still for half a second in the hallway, his fingers curling once at his side before he let them relax. Then he straightened his jacket, the borrowed one that sat a little too loose on his shoulders, and began walking. It was peak morning. Inside the building, voices echoed lightly across polished surfaces. Shoes tapped in efficient rhythms. Somewhere nearby, an elevator chimed. The world moved on seamlessly without noticing that. Something had just ended. He did not need anyone to explain the decision to him. The shift had happened halfway through the interview, subtle but unmistakable. The questions had changed. Not what can you handle, but where do you come from? Not how would you respond, but how would you look? Image. That word had never appeared on the job description, yet it had filled the room. Like an invisible barrier he was never meant to cross. Ryan passed a row of glass-walled offices and reached the elevator bank. He pressed the button once, then withdrew his hand, choosing instead to take the stairs down to the lobby. He needed the movement, needed the time. With each step, fragments of the interview replayed in his mind. The polite smiles, the careful nods, the moment when the man at the center of the table had leaned back and folded his hands as if the outcome were already decided. He had not argued. He had not defended himself beyond the facts. 8 years in hospitality, 3 years in this building, a record free of complaints, a calm under pressure he had earned the hard way. None of it had been enough. The stairwell door opened, and daylight spilled in. Ryan stepped into the lobby and felt it immediately. The contrast, the vastness, the brightness. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling glass, striking the marble floor so sharply it reflected. Like water. He had cleaned this space hundreds of times, always after midnight, when the lights were dimmed and the building felt hollow. At night, the lobby belonged to him. In the day, it belonged to everyone else. He walked slowly, aware of his reflection moving beneath his feet. A man in a suit. A man who almost looked like he belonged here if you didn't look too closely. If you didn't ask where he came from or how he had arrived. At least I didn't beg, he thought. The idea steadied him. There were lines a person learned not to cross after enough disappointments. For Ryan, that line was dignity. He could accept rejection. He could accept silence. What he would not accept was shrinking himself to fit someone else's comfort. He reached the center of the lobby. When his phone vibrated softly in his pocket, Ryan stopped. For a moment he considered ignoring it. The building had already taken enough from him this morning. But instinct won. He pulled the phone out and glanced at the screen. School office asterisk. Asterisk, just a quick note. Leo used his inhaler before class today. He's okay. We'll keep an eye on him. Asterisk. Ryan's chest tightened. Sharp and familiar. He exhaled slowly, counting the seconds the way he always did when worry threatened to take over. Leo was fine. The message said so. Still, the reminder settled heavily in his bones. Hospital bills, prescription refills, the quiet calculations that followed him everywhere, even here, especially here. Ryan slipped the phone back into his pocket and resumed walking. Each step felt deliberate now, like a decision being reinforced rather than reconsidered. He could still turn around, ask for feedback, offer reassurances, tell them he was adaptable, grateful, willing to learn. He didn't. He reached the glass doors at the front of the building and placed his palm against the cool surface. Outside, the city moved at its usual pace. Cars gliding past, people waiting at the crosswalk, a life that did not pause for disappointment. This was where he left. Ryan pulled the door open and stepped forward, letting the sunlight hit his face fully. The air outside was crisp, carrying the faint sounds of traffic and conversation. He took one step onto the sidewalk, then another. Ryan Cole. The voice cut cleanly through the noise. He froze. For a brief, irrational moment, he wondered if he had imagined it. If his mind, still trapped in the aftermath of the interview, was replaying his name out of habit. Then the voice came again, closer this time. "Ryan, please." He turned. Inside the lobby, near the security desk, stood a woman in a dark suit, her posture composed but her expression urgent. People moved around her, unaware that the air between them had shifted. Ryan did not recognize her immediately, but something in the way the security guard had stepped back, something in the stillness of the space around her, told him this was not a mistake. She met his eyes across the glass, and for the first time that morning, Ryan felt the certainty beneath his disappointment begin to waver. Tuesday, 10:43 a.m. Alexandra Reed did not raise her voice. She didn't have to. The lobby shifted the moment she spoke Ryan's name, as if the air itself recognized authority before the mind could catch up. She stood a few steps inside the building, her posture straight, her expression controlled, the dark fabric of her suit catching the light without reflecting it. Ryan hesitated at the threshold, one foot still outside, the other planted on the marble floor he knew too well. He had spent years learning how to disappear in this space. Now, with a single word, he had been pulled back into it. "Please," Alexandra said again, softer this time. "Just for a moment." Ryan stepped inside. The glass doors closed behind him, sealing off the street and the escape he had nearly completed. He didn't know why he stayed. Perhaps it was the steadiness in her voice. Perhaps it was the way she looked at him, not with curiosity or sympathy, but with focus. She gestured toward a quiet corner of the lobby, away from the flow of people passing through. As they walked, the sound of her heels echoed lightly against the marble, each step measured, unhurried. Ryan noticed the badge clipped to her jacket, the simple design bearing her name and title. The word felt unreal applied to someone standing 3 feet away. Alexandra stopped and faced him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "I saw your interview," she said finally. Ryan's jaw tightened. He nodded once, unsure what response was expected. "I have access to the internal review system," she continued, "part of an ongoing evaluation of our hiring practices. I watch randomly, not often, but today I did." Her gaze didn't leave his. There was no accusation in it, only a quiet acknowledgement. "I saw the questions change," she said. "I saw the moment when your experience stopped being enough." Ryan felt a familiar pressure in his chest, the instinct to minimize, to deflect. "It happens," he said. "I understand how these things work." Alexandra studied him. "Do you?" The question wasn't sharp, but it landed with weight. She exhaled slowly. 2 months ago, an elderly woman nearly collapsed in this lobby. She's one of our longest-standing partners. You were the one who noticed. You stayed with her until help arrived." Ryan frowned slightly. "Anyone would have." "That's not true," Alexandra said. "Plenty of people walked past her. You didn't." She paused, her eyes drifting briefly toward the center of the lobby where the light fell brightest. "She mentioned you to me later, the janitor who stayed calm, who paid attention. I meant to find you, to thank you." A faint, rueful smile touched her mouth. "I didn't," Ryan said. "Nothing." Gratitude had never been his currency. Alexandra straightened, the professional mask settling more firmly into place. "When I saw your name on the interview schedule this morning, I didn't connect it at first. Then I saw your face." Her voice softened, and I remembered. For the first time since she had called him back, something flickered beneath her composure. Not doubt, recognition. "I know this feeling," she thought, "being measured by something you can't change." The memory came uninvited. Her first executive meeting years ago, seated at the edge of a long table. The polite surprise when she spoke. The quiet recalibration when she mentioned where she'd grown up, how she'd worked her way through school. She had learned quickly which parts of herself to present and which to keep hidden. Silence had been her survival. Alexandra met Ryan's eyes again. I've spent a long time telling myself that systems change slowly, that pushing too hard only creates resistance. Her fingers tightened briefly at her side. But sometimes, not pushing is a choice too. Ryan absorbed her words carefully. He didn't trust speeches. He trusted actions. What happens now? He asked. Alexandra didn't answer immediately. She glanced toward the security desk, then toward the elevators, where employees continued moving through their routines, unaware of the line being drawn in the lobby. What happens now? She said. Is that I ask for accountability. She reached into her jacket and pulled out her phone. The movement was precise, practiced. Ryan noticed the steadiness of her hands. There will be questions, she went on as her screen lit up. There will be discomfort, and there will be people who remind me why this is inconvenient. Her thumb hovered over the screen for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. This will cost you, a voice inside her warned. You know that. Alexandra pressed the call button. Send the hiring panel down to the lobby, she said when the line connected. Her tone was calm, unmistakable. Immediately, she ended the call and slipped the phone back into her jacket. When she looked at Ryan again, there was no uncertainty left in her expression. You're not required to stay, she said. You can walk out right now, and no one will hold it against you. Ryan considered the offer, the easy exit, the certainty of leaving with nothing altered except his own resolve. He thought of Leo, of the message waiting quietly in his pocket, of the years spent, unseen. I'll stay, he said. Alexandra nodded once. The elevator chimed behind them. Tuesday, 11 a.m. The elevator doors opened onto the lobby with a soft chime that seemed louder than it should have been. Marcus Hale stepped out first, his expression carefully neutral, followed by the two members of the hiring panel. They paused when they saw Alexandra Reed standing near the center of the space, Ryan a few feet beside her. Around them, the lobby continued its steady rhythm, people moving, voices overlapping. Yet a subtle tension settled in the air, as if the room itself were listening. Alexandra, Marcus said, recovering quickly. Is there an issue? Yes, she replied. There is. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't step closer. She simply turned slightly, placing Ryan fully within the circle of attention. The gesture was deliberate. I reviewed the interview you conducted this morning, Alexandra continued. I want to understand the decision to reject Mr. Cole. Marcus hesitated, then straightened. We followed standard criteria, he said. Mr. Cole didn't meet all the qualifications we're looking for. Be specific, Alexandra said. Marcus glanced at his colleagues, then back at her. He doesn't have a college degree. He lacks formal training relevant to a front desk role. Alexandra nodded once. Does the job description require a degree? Marcus paused. No, but it's preferred. Preferred, Alexandra repeated. Not required. One of the panel members shifted her weight. The front desk is a visible position, she added carefully. It represents the company. Ryan felt the words land, without ever touching him directly. Visible. Represent. Image. Alexandra turned toward the panelist. And what about Mr. Cole's experience? He worked in hospitality, Marcus said. In the past. For 8 years, Alexandra corrected. Managing guest relations. Handling complaints. Training staff. Marcus nodded. Yes, but that was a different environment. How so? Alexandra asked. There was a beat of silence. The expectations are different here, Marcus said finally. Clients expect a certain polish. Alexandra let the silence stretch. It filled the space between them, pressing against the glass walls and polished surfaces. In the distance, an elevator chimed again, unanswered. Ryan stood still, his hands relaxed at his sides. He had learned long ago that arguing for his worth rarely changed anyone's mind. Alexandra turned slightly. Ethan, a man standing a few steps back, looked up, startled. Ethan Miller, operations manager for the lower floors, had been observing quietly, his hands clasped in front of him. He stepped forward. "You started out on the night crew," Alexandra said. "Didn't you?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, years ago." "Did that make you less capable of managing operations today?" "No," Ethan said simply. Alexandra looked back at Marcus. "Mr. Cole has worked in this building for 3 years, without a single complaint. He knows this space as well as anyone. Did that factor into your decision?" "It's not the same kind of work," Marcus replied. "The skill set is interacting with people," Alexandra said. "Problem solving, remaining composed. Would you agree?" Marcus hesitated. "In part." Alexandra turned to Ryan. "Tell me about a difficult situation you handled in hospitality." Ryan met her gaze. "A guest once arrived after a long flight to find their reservation missing. They were angry, exhausted." He kept his voice steady. "I listened. I apologized. I worked with the manager to find a solution. They left satisfied." Alexandra nodded. "Would that skill be useful at our front desk?" Marcus didn't answer. The panelist beside him cleared her throat. "We weren't questioning his character," she said. "We were assessing fit." "Fit," Alexandra repeated. "For what?" "For the culture," Marcus said. Alexandra's expression hardened slightly. "Culture is not an aesthetic," she said. "It's how decisions are made when no one is watching." She reached out and picked up Ryan's resume from the glass table nearby. The paper looked small, against the expanse of polished surface. "This document tells me where Mr. Cole has been," she said. "It does not tell me who he is. You dismissed him based on assumptions rather than evidence." Marcus opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. "The hiring decision is being suspended," Alexandra said. "Effective immediately." The words settled heavily. "We'll reconvene after a full review," she continued. "One based on qualifications relevant to the role." Ryan exhaled quietly, not in relief, but in acknowledgement. Something had shifted, not in his favor necessarily, but in truth. Alexandra turned to him. "Mr. Cole," she said, "I'd like to speak with you privately." Marcus stiffened. "Alexandra, this conversation is over," she said calmly. The panel stepped back, retreating toward the elevators. As the doors closed, the lobby seemed to breathe again. Alexandra gestured toward the conference rooms overlooking the floor. "Come with me." Ryan followed, aware of the curious glances trailing them. He didn't know what would come next. He only knew that, for the first time, the system had been forced to look at itself. And it had blinked. Tuesday, early afternoon. The conference room overlooked the lobby through a wide pane of glass. From above, the movement below seemed smaller, less urgent. People crossing paths without colliding, each absorbed in their own direction. Alexandra Reed sat at the round table, her hands folded neatly in front of her, while Ryan took the chair opposite. "This isn't an offer," she said. After a moment, "Not yet." Ryan nodded. He appreciated the clarity. "What I can offer," Alexandra continued, "is a 2-month training placement with our customer service management team, paid. Full benefits from day one." She paused, then added, "For you and your son." The words landed carefully, as if placed rather than dropped. Ryan felt his chest tighten, not from excitement, but from the weight of what they implied. Stability, coverage, a future that didn't require constant calculation. "At the end of the program," Alexandra said, "there will be a formal evaluation. If you meet the standards, the front desk position becomes yours. If you don't, we part ways with respect." Ryan leaned back slightly, considering. This was not charity. It was a test. One he would have to pass under scrutiny sharper than before. "I need time," he said. Alexandra inclined her head. 24 hours. He stood, adjusting the sleeves of his jacket. "Thank you," he said, meaning it without certainty. Tuesday evening. The apartment smelled faintly of pasta and detergent. Ryan set his keys on the counter and hung his jacket by the door, the same work jacket he had worn for years, the fabric softened by repetition. Leo sat at the small kitchen table, swinging his legs as he worked through a worksheet. "How was your day?" Ryan asked, keeping his tone light. Leo shrugged. "Okay." "We learned about states." Ryan smiled faintly and moved to the stove. They ate in quiet comfort for a few minutes, the sound of forks tapping plates filling the space. Between them, Leo looked up. "Did you get the job?" Ryan paused. He set his fork down. "Not yet," he said. "I got something else." He explained it simply, training, learning, a chance to prove himself. He didn't mention the boardroom or the confrontation. Those were adult weights. Leo listened, serious beyond his years. "What if it doesn't work?" he asked. Ryan met his son's eyes. "Then it doesn't," he said. "But that doesn't change who we are. Or what I am to you." Leo nodded slowly, absorbing this. "You'd still be my dad." "Always," Ryan said. They finished dinner. Leo took his inhaler before bed, routine and unremarkable, and Ryan watched him disappear into his room with a familiar ache of responsibility. Later, Ryan sat alone at the table, the clock ticking softly on the wall. He thought of the years he had spent saying no to possibility because it felt safer. Thought of the cost of staying invisible. He picked up his phone. Tuesday night. Alexandra's office lights were still on. She sat across from her legal advisor and a member of the executive committee, both of whom wore expressions carefully calibrated between concern and caution. "This creates exposure," the advisor said. "If it's perceived as favoritism, it's perceived as fairness," Alexandra replied. "There's a difference." "Not to everyone," the executive said. "People will ask why now. Why him?" Alexandra leaned back, her gaze drifting briefly to the city beyond the window. "Because I saw it happen," she said. "And I can't pretend I didn't." There was silence, thick and uncomfortable. "This won't be popular," the advisor warned. "There will be resistance." Alexandra nodded. "I'm aware." When they left, the office felt unusually quiet. Alexandra stood alone for a moment, resting her hands on the back of her chair. She thought of her younger self, sitting in rooms where she had felt out of place, choosing silence because it was easier. She reached for her phone. Later that night, Ryan's phone buzzed. "Alexandra, read, whenever you're ready. No pressure." Ryan stared at the message for a long moment. He glanced at the jacket by the door, at the clock. Then he typed, "Ryan Cole, I'm in." He sent the message and let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Early Wednesday morning, Ryan pulled on his work jacket and stepped into the hallway, the air cool and familiar. The city was quiet at this hour, the kind of quiet that belonged to people who worked while others slept. As he headed toward the bus stop, he didn't know exactly where the path would lead. He only knew he had chosen to walk it. The training period did not announce itself with hostility. It arrived quietly, disguised as professionalism. Ryan noticed it on the first morning, standing in a glass-walled conference room with for other trainees. They were younger, late 20s, early 30s at most, and their introductions carried a rhythm he recognized but did not share. Degrees mentioned casually, previous titles, spoken with confidence, a shared language shaped by similar paths. Ryan gave his name, his experience. Nothing more. No one was rude. That would have been easier. Instead, there were polite smiles that stopped short of warmth, conversations that resumed only after he stepped away. A chair left empty beside him at lunch. A pause, brief, almost imperceptible, when he joined a group at the elevator. Bank. It was subtle, practiced. The building itself felt different during the day. Bright lights washed the hallways in a pale glow that flattened everything it touched. Printers hummed. Keycards beeped. The air conditioning carried a constant, distant breath, as if the building were alive but indifferent. Ryan focused on the work. He arrived early, took notes, asked questions only when necessary. When the instructor demonstrated systems Ryan had never used before, He stayed late to practice, his fingers learning the patterns until they felt natural. He reminded himself that competence did not require approval. Brandon noticed him anyway. Brandon was quick, articulate, and visibly frustrated. He asked sharp questions during training sessions, always framing them in ways that highlighted his own preparation. When Ryan spoke, Brandon listened with an expression that was not openly dismissive, but tight. Once, during a role-play exercise, Brandon corrected Ryan. Mid-sentence. "That's not how we phrase it," he said, smiling thinly. Ryan paused, then nodded. "Thanks." Later, the instructor quietly told Ryan he had handled the scenario exactly right. Ryan didn't share that with anyone. Ethan Miller did, though. Ethan rarely spoke during sessions, but he watched everything. Sometimes he caught Ryan's eye across the room and gave the slightest nod, an acknowledgement so small it might have gone unnoticed by anyone else. Once, when a system login malfunctioned, Ethan fixed it without comment and left Ryan's screen active before anyone realized there had been a problem. Support, Ryan learned, didn't always announce itself. Alexandra Reed remained distant. She passed through the training floor occasionally, always with others, her presence brief and controlled. When her eyes met Ryan's, she offered nothing more than a professional nod. No conversations. No check-ins. At first, Ryan understood. Then, slowly, the distance began to weigh on him. It wasn't disappointment he felt, more like restraint. A door held closed on purpose. He found himself noticing small things instead. The way she listened more than she spoke. The way she paused before entering a room, as if grounding herself. The way her voice softened when she addressed staff by name. It would have been easier if she had been colder. Weeks passed. Ryan adapted. He learned the systems faster than expected. Handled simulated conflicts with steady patience. When feedback came, it was precise, professional, and increasingly positive. Still, the space around him remained intact, clear boundaries, measured distance. At lunch one afternoon, Brandon sat across from him for the first time. "You're doing well," Brandon said, not quite meeting his eyes. Ryan nodded. "So are you." Brandon hesitated. "It's just, people are watching. They want to know why you're here." Ryan considered the words. "I'm here to learn," he said. "Same as you." Brandon looked away, unsatisfied but without an argument. That evening, as Ryan rode the elevator down alone, he watched the numbers descend. 15, 14, 13. Each floor represented something different during the day. Authority, access, distance. At night, they were all the same. He thought of the years he had spent moving between these levels unseen, pushing a cart through hallways that now required credentials. The irony didn't escape him. 2 months in, the training coordinator pulled Ryan aside. "There will be a live evaluation," she said. "At the front desk." Ryan's pulse quickened. "When?" "Soon," she replied. "You'll be ready." The word echoed in his mind as he returned to his station. Ready. As if readiness could be measured. Only by performance and not by the weight of expectation pressing in from every direction. That afternoon, Alexandra passed through the lobby as Ryan observed from the training floor above. She paused briefly, speaking with security, her posture composed, her attention divided. Ryan wondered, not for the first time, what it cost her to remain neutral. The elevator doors slid shut. Ryan gathered his notes and stood, unaware that the quiet rhythm of the building was about to fracture. Below him, in the lobby he knew by heart, something was already beginning to go wrong. The evaluation day began like any other. Ryan arrived early, reviewed the schedule, and took his place near the front desk with a calm he had practiced into habit. The lobby carried its usual daytime rhythm, footsteps crossing marble, the low murmur of greetings, the soft chime of elevators opening and closing. Light poured through the glass walls in clean, moving bands as clouds passed. Outside, he told himself to focus on what was in front of him. Then his phone vibrated. Ryan didn't look at it right away. He finished answering a visitor's question, directed them toward the correct elevator bank, and waited until there was a pause before pulling the phone from his pocket. School office. His breath tightened before he even opened the message. Leo felt short of breath. During recess. He's okay now. We'd like a parent to come by. Ryan's fingers curled around the phone. The words blurred for a moment as his thoughts raced ahead, routes, timing, worst-case outcomes. He tried hard not to entertain. He glanced up. At that exact moment, a sharp ripple of confusion moved through the lobby. A delivery driver raised his voice, frustrated. Two visitors stood uncertain. Near the security desk, their appointments overlapping. A line began to form, tension building in small, unmistakable ways. The evaluation had begun. Ryan stood still, suspended between two truths, pulling him in opposite directions. One demanded presence here, now. The other called him elsewhere, with a voice he could never ignore. He inhaled once, deep and steady. "Ethan," he said quietly, turning to the operations manager nearby. "Can you cover the desk for 2 minutes?" Ethan's eyes flicked to Ryan's phone, then back to his face. "Of course." Ryan stepped aside and made a call. Not to the school, but to a trusted neighbor who worked nearby. He explained quickly, clearly, his voice level despite the pressure tightening his chest. "I'll be there," he said when he hung up. 5 minutes. He returned to the desk. "Good morning," he said, addressing the waiting visitors with a calm that didn't waver. "Thank you for your patience. We'll take care of you." He delegated without hesitation, his voice measured, his instructions precise. The delivery issue was resolved with a quick clarification. Appointments were confirmed. The line eased, the tension dissipating as efficiently as it had formed. From the edge of the lobby, members of the management team observed in silence. Alexandra Reed stood among them, her attention fixed on Ryan. She had expected competence. She had not expected this. When Leo arrived, pale but alert, Ryan was there. He knelt immediately, bringing himself to eye level, his hand resting lightly on his.
Son es schulde.
"Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" Leo nodded. "I feel better now." Ryan exhaled, the breath leaving him in a quiet rush. He didn't pull Leo away from the lobby. He didn't abandon his post. Instead, he guided his son to a chair just behind the desk, within sight, within reach. "Sit here," he said. "I've got you." He signaled to security, explained the situation with clarity and respect, and continued working. Visitors came and went. Questions were answered. Problems were solved. Ryan moved between roles seamlessly, professional and father, composed and present. When Leo needed water, Ryan handed it to him without breaking conversation. When a moment allowed, he checked in with a glance, a nod. The building watched. Alexandra felt something shift inside her, sharp and undeniable. She had spent years mastering separation, work from personal life, emotion from decision-making. She had believed that balance required distance. Ryan showed her something else. When the rush finally slowed, Ryan stepped away from the desk and crouched beside Leo again. "We're going to head out," he said gently. "Just like we talked about." Leo smiled faintly. "You didn't leave." Ryan smiled back. "I didn't have to." As they stood, Alexandra moved forward. The lobby quieted, not completely, but enough. Ryan turned, surprise flickering across his face as he met her gaze. "Well done," Alexandra said, her voice steady despite the weight behind it. Ryan nodded once. "Thank you." She looked at Leo, then back at Ryan. "We'll talk soon." Ryan didn't ask what that meant. He took Leo's hand and walked toward the doors, the light shifting around them as they moved. Alexandra watched them go, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. For the first time in a long while, she understood that leadership was not about choosing between priorities. It was about holding them both. 6 months later, morning light filled the lobby in a gentler way now. It arrived not as a glare off marble, but as a warmth that spread evenly across the floor, softening edges and slowing the pace of the room. The city outside moved with purpose. Buses pulling in, doors opening, voices carrying. But inside, there was a sense of order that felt earned rather than imposed. Ryan Cole stood behind the front desk, straightening a stack of visitor badges. The nameplate in front of him was simple. No flerist, no explanation. Just his name and title etched cleanly. He had learned that titles mattered less than how you carried them. Still, he took a quiet pride in seeing his name there each morning. "Good morning," he said, looking up with an easy smile. "How can I help you?" The question came naturally now. Not rehearsed, not cautious, just present. Leo waited nearby, backpack slung over one shoulder, tapping his foot in a rhythm only he seemed to hear. He was taller than he had been 6 months ago, his posture looser, his breathing steady. He waved at a security guard who waved back. "Ready?" Ryan asked. Leo nodded. "I've got science today." Ryan smiled. "You'll do great." Leo headed toward the doors, then paused. "Dad." Ryan looked up. "Thanks for not giving up." Ryan's throat tightened. "Thanks for reminding me why." Leo grinned and disappeared into the morning. Ryan returned to his work. The flow of the day unfolded as it always did. Appointments checked in, directions given, small problems solved before they grew into larger ones. The systems ran smoothly, but what made the difference was not software or policy. It was attention. Across the lobby, Ethan Miller moved with a new confidence. His role had expanded over the months, responsibilities aligning more closely with the work he had already been doing quietly for years. He paused near the desk and gave Ryan a nod. "Meeting on 3 is running late," Ethan said. "I'll adjust the schedule." "Thanks," Ryan replied. "I'll let them know." It was a small exchange. Ordinary. And that was the point. The changes in the building had not arrived with announcements or slogans. They came through conversations, through decisions that held when no one was watching, through people being trusted to do the work they had already proven they could do. Near midday, Alexandra Reed crossed the lobby. She moved without entourage, her pace unhurried, her presence calm. When she reached the desk, Ryan met her eyes, and for a moment, neither spoke. "How's the morning?" she asked. "Busy," Ryan said. "In a good way." She nodded. "That's usually how it starts." They walked together toward the glass wall overlooking the street. The distance between them, once carefully maintained, had softened into something unspoken but understood. Boundaries had been respected. Time had done its work. "I meant what I said," Alexandra said quietly. "That day." Ryan glanced at her. "I know." She rested her hands lightly on the railing. "It took me longer than I care to admit to understand what leadership really asks of us." Ryan considered this. "Sometimes it asks us to notice," he said, "even when it's uncomfortable." She smiled at that, not as a CEO but as a woman who had learned something the hard way. Later, as the afternoon settled, Ryan found himself remembering a different version of this space. A night years ago, the first winter he worked here. The lobby dimmed, quiet except for the hum of lights, his cart squeaking slightly as he moved across the floor, unseen, unremarked, doing the work anyway. The memory passed without bitterness. Because now, in the present, Ryan stood in the same place as sunlight drifted across the marble. He watched people move through the building with a sense of belonging that did not depend on permission. As the day wound down, Alexandra returned to the desk. This time, she didn't speak right away. She reached out instead, her hand brushing his. Ryan took it. There was no audience for the moment. No declaración. Just a shared understanding that had grown quietly, rooted in respect and patience. Outside, the city continued on. Inside, the lobby glowed. Ryan looked around at the doors opening and closing, at the reflections in the glass, at the people who passed through carrying their own stories, their own unseen efforts. He had once believed that change came from being chosen. Now he knew better. Change came from being seen, and from learning to see others in return. The world doesn't change when we are given an opportunity. It changes when we learn to truly see one another